Welcome to the Daily Breaking News YouTube channel. After Russia retreated from Kiev, Putin wanted to give the Russian people a triumph to compensate for their losses, so the Russian army moved to Donbass. It was obvious that fighting in a more constrained region would benefit the Russian forces. At least that's what the Russian army hoped for after the Ukrainian conflict highlighted the Russian army's coordination shortcomings. The danbas assaults, on the other hand, did not occur. As anticipated, the key issue with Russia's second failed operation was a barrage strike stretching over 500 kilometers. Russia has increasingly attempted to attack more specific targets by fighting in considerably smaller regions. Russia believed that by doing so, it would be able to advance more easily, and this answer was still applicable in the beginning as a consequence of the strong strikes that began with Russian bombardments. The Russian army took control of 80% of the Severodonetsk area a week ago. However, the Ukrainian army quickly withdrew to a secure location, preventing the Russian army from taking complete control of the city. All of the world's media reported a few days ago that the Russian army might entirely take the Severodonetsk region, and that Russia was quite close to doing so. With a surprise operation in Severodonetsk, the Ukrainian army reclaimed half of the districts that Russia had taken in a week. While stationed in the region, the Ukrainian International Legion took part in the combat and delivered extra ammunition and material assistance for the Ukrainian military forces. The Russian army was therefore repulsed by the Ukrainian surprise attack and offensive. The Ukrainian armed forces are waging counterattacks against the Russian army's latest strategic shift and are defeating the Russian army in the region. The president of the military administration of the Luhansk area personally carried out the liberation of more than half of the Severodonetsk region, which the Russian army took 80% of the repulse of the Russian army. Sir Hady countered that this estimate was unreasonable, claiming that Russia had liberated half of the region. The counterattack of Ukrainian armed forces in the Severodonetsk area, 80% of which was captured at the breaking point of the battle in the Severodonetsk region, had begun weeks earlier. The fights on the Syversky-Djinets River, as well as Russia's significant losses, were Ukraine's first strikes against the Russian army in the region. Despite losing 3 battalions of tanks in these strikes, the Russian army did not stop and continued to push. However, in the Severodonetsk area, Ukraine dispatched extra soldiers, including some international volunteer fighters. It revealed that troops from the Ukrainian International Legion had arrived in the besieged city in reaction to Russia's assault, while efforts to oppose Russia's onslaught continued. Foreign forces are apparently part of a significant Ukrainian counteroffensive in the area, armed primarily with Belgian-made FN, Skar-L, Czech, and CZ assault weapons and NLAW rockets. Several hundred foreign mercenaries, including those from Georgia, were relocated to Severodonetsk, which is still under the control of the Ukrainian army, contradicting previously released statistics. The fact that the majority of the foreign soldiers that arrived in the region were war veterans with combat experience bolstered Ukrainian attacks in the region. Ukraine appears to have decided to redeploy reinforcements and troops to the region rather than flee as Russian forces moved deeper into the city. Initially, it was anticipated that a substantial resistance would be formed in Severodonetsk. However, unlike the months-long fight for Mariupol, what happened in Severodonetsk was that combat in confined city corridors both assisted Ukrainian operations and crushed an increasing number of Russian forces. At the same time, the Ukrainian armed forces moved additional troops to the Severodonetsk area, armed with fresh weaponry supplied by their Western friends, resulting in the Ukrainian armed forces retaking the majority of the city. This was the correct decision, and as a consequence, the Russian army was left unanswered. However, Russian President Vladimir Putin's tough statement yesterday was enough to frighten Europe and the rest of the globe. Furthermore, Russian President Putin stated that the Western weapons systems deployed to Ukraine have prolonged the settlement process, and that if more long-range missiles are brought to Ukraine, Russia will strike new targets. He didn't say what those objectives were. He further stated that Russia will undoubtedly achieve its objectives. Negotiations have currently been stopped by both Ukraine and Russia. Ukraine has stated that it will not cede any land to Russia. On the other hand, Russia seeks from Ukraine an assurance that it will not join NATO, the autonomy of the Donbass area, the disbandment and disarming of the Ukrainian army, and the acknowledgement of Crimea as Russian territory are unacceptably high for Ukraine. If Ukraine is dearmed, Russia may take the Donbass in the same way that Crimea did and totally conquer a dearmed, non-NATO member Ukraine. While the mutual conditions are what they are, Ukraine may be in the midst of a protracted conflict. The conflict in Ukraine is increasingly devolving into urban skirmishes and guerrilla warfare. In such a circumstance, the conflict may take years to investigate the Russian army's attacks in the region. The Russian army opened fire in the direction of Slavojinsky between Starakov and Katernivka in the Sumy area and Kamianska-Sloboda in the Chernihiv district. The Russian army is beefing up its reserves in preparation for more offensive operations against Izium, Barvinkov, and Slavyansk in the direction of Kharkiv. Russian troops are attempting to defend the gained boundaries and obstruct Ukrainian forces' progress. The enemy is regularly shelling Ukrainian positions. The most serious of these strikes, which encircled Donbass, occurred in the Severodonetsk area in the direction of Severodonetsk. The Russian army used artillery and multiple launch rocket systems to attack Severodonetsk, Lysychansk, Ostanica, and Toshika. The Russian army used Ka-52 helicopters between Hersky-Yakovlevka and Myrna Dolina, as well as Su-25 aircraft near Ostanivka, to conduct airstrikes. In truth, Russia's air support in the region is severely constrained owing to the Ukrainian armed forces' inability to fully activate their air defense systems in the region. They provide air assistance to ground operations in the harsh Donetsk and Donbass regions. In contrast to Kiev, the Russian army is currently blowing up bridges over the Seversky-Dviniets River. This includes slowing down Ukrainian forces as they try to resupply their soldiers and provide humanitarian relief to Severodonetsk, as well as halting the flow of reinforcements heading into the area as Kiev attempts to retake lost ground. The most concrete thing that this insane maneuver demonstrates is that the Russian army will be unable to stop the advance of Ukrainian armed forces, while the latter are moving swiftly against the Russian army, which they beat from afar. The Russian army appears to be attempting to reclaim the territory formerly held in the Severodonetsk region. Within a few days, the bridge detonation was discovered to be a tactic utilized by Ukrainian military forces. The Ukrainian armed forces blew up bridges in the early days of the occupation to halt the advance of Russian troops and armored vehicles. Regarding the sieges of Kiev and Kharkiv, he claimed that Russia is terrified of the Ukrainian armed forces' capability and that the Ukrainian armed forces will reply to all of the Russian army's anxieties if the required cargoes are not supplied. Made at the same time, the Ukrainian military forces were said to have defeated 9 successive Russian strikes on the city in the previous 24 hours. According to reports, the Russians attempted to encircle Ukrainian soldiers in the Severodonetsk area, but each effort failed. So, what is the significance of the Donbass region for Ukraine? Let us attempt to address this question. The danbas area is Ukraine's industrial core. The towns of Severodonetsk and Lysychansk, on opposing sides of the Seversky-Donets River, comprise the Donbass area, are the last 2 Ukrainian cities located in the Luhansk Oblast. Severodonetsk was temporarily overrun by rebels in 2014, aided by the annexation of Crimea, although it was immediately recaptured by Ukrainian military forces. For the Russian army, Severodonetsk is strategically important. After taking this location, the Russian army, which hopes to join Russian soldiers in Luhansk and Izium via Severodonetsk, plans to attack Slavensk and Kramatorsk with a much stronger and more cohesive unit. As a result, all Ukrainian military units in Donbass will be removed, and a safe zone will be left behind for the eventual Kharkiv attack. However, considering the current scenario, it would be safe to argue that this is unlikely. If the pressure from Ukraine's military forces continues in the coming days, Severodonetsk will be a fresh defeat for Russia. Such a response to Russia's plan to concentrate on and take over small areas would hurt Russia's reputation even more than when the Russian army was besieging Kiev. It would also make the Ukrainian army more determined to fight.